I don't think Modi is either capable or interested in changing his style of function.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's probably constitutionally incapable of doing it, even if he were to want to. And all the indications are that so far is that he's going to try and run this government as if the BJP had got 340 instead of 240. But the reality is different. And certainly, um, there can be tensions, there can even be crises,
Mm-hmm.
given that the so-called NDA coalition itself has a relatively small majority of only, about 20 or so beyond the 272 mark. One thing that has been damaged by this election is the omnipresent Modi personality cult. The Modi personality cult is, I think, seriously damaged. But today's swearing in, if you watched it live, you would think that they had got 340, plus another 60 or so for the allies. So the magical, 400 mark had been reached. But the reality is something very different. It's 240, more than 30 short of a majority, plus 50 odd from an odd assortment of allies. But you would not know that from the composition of the cabinet.
Hello and welcome to In Conversation with Kashmir Times. I'm Anuradha Bhasin. Our guest today is a noted author and comparative political scientist, Sumantra Bose. He's affiliated with the London School of Economics and he's written several books. I've even lost count of how many books he's written, but his last three books about contemporary India and its problems. Transforming India, Challenges to the World's Largest Democracy by Harvard University Press. Another book is called The Secular States, Religious Politics, India, Turkey, and the Future of Secularism. And his third book is Kashmir at the Crossroads, Inside a 21st Century Conflict. And his next book, The Modi Era, India and the Story of a Democracy in Eclipse, will be published by Yale University Press in 2025, and we'll await that. Um, Professor Sumantra Bose shuttles between Kolkata and London, and today he's joining us from Kolkata. Welcome uh, to our show.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. As you know, Anuradha, my relationship with your family and with Kashmir Times goes back 3 decades now.
Yeah.
So I'm actually happy to join you on this program today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And it's always a pleasure listening to you. So how do you view the Lok Sabha elections, the results? And very quickly, I mean, this is a very uh, cliched question, but very quickly, what are some of the key takeaways from these elections?
Well, I've just finished listening to and, well, rather watching the swearing in of the third Modi government.
Mhm.
Now, some people mistakenly thought that after the results came out last Tuesday, that this would be NDA government rather than a Modi slash BJP government. But if the composition of the cabinet is any indication, it's just Modi slash BJP government with the assortment of allies simply added on. Um, I find that quite remarkable. Um, I'm the first to confess that I did not foresee the BJP losing its parliamentary majority, and in fact falling more than 30 seats short, 240. But today's swearing in, if you watched it live, you would think
Right.
that they had got 340, plus another 60 or so for the allies. So the magical, 400 mark had been reached. But the reality is something very different. It's 240, more than 30 short of a majority, plus 50 odd from an odd assortment of allies. But you would not know that from the composition of the cabinet. At the very least, when a ruling party suffers a major setback, which this was, after winning two consecutive parliamentary majorities, after all, 282 in 2014 and 303 in 2019, it falls to 240 despite all the hype, hot air, and
Right.
bombast. Then the minimum that is required, I think, and advisable, recommended, is a change in the major personnel of government. But from the composition of the cabinet today, it's quite clear that it will be the same cabal of two, namely Modi and Amit Shah, who will continue to call the shots, despite the BJP not having a parliamentary majority. Now, we'll have to see whether this verdict that we had earlier this week is simply a bad stumble for Modi, or whether it is the beginning of the end. It could be, simply a bad stumble from which he and they will recover, or it could be the beginning of the end. So
How do
we'll have
you
to
see it?
see. Um, One thing that has been damaged by this election is the omnipresent Modi personality cult. The Modi personality cult is, I think, seriously damaged. Now, there were three pillars to the BJP election campaign and strategy. One was the muscular, aggressive, strident, and uncompromising ideological Hindu nationalism, with all its hate speech and calumnies. The second was social welfareism and the purported concern for the poor and the needy and the deprived sections of society, for the subaltern Hindus, so to
Mhm.
speak. And these two pillars were being held up by a third pillar. That is the cult of Modi as the visionary leader, under whose helmsmanship India has entered the Amrit Kal and will march towards glory, progress, and all-round development until the centenary of independence is reached in 2047. Well, it's quite clear that that particular grandiose vision has not found enough takers. It has, at the very least, not been endorsed by the electorate, and one can say cautiously, may have been rejected. During the election campaign, just about a month ago, I think, in the second week of May, I gave an interview to Al Jazeera English right here in Kolkata. And they used only one, small, sound bite, but there were a few other things that I said that they did not use for reasons of time, I think, and that was that I said I am a critic of the Indian opposition. It is disparate, fragmented, leaderless, and largely rudderless. And I haven't changed my opinion of the Indian opposition, the spectrum of the Indian opposition, despite the election result. But I said that I still have some faith in the common Indian voter, the average Indian voter, to do the right thing. At that time, it was a leap of faith for me, a month ago exactly. And I did not realize, I did not expect that it would partially materialize. Of course, the BJP has had significant reverses in a few key states. One must remember that, and elsewhere in
Uttar
the country,
Pradesh.
it's done quite well. In Uttar Pradesh, where I think an opposition party, the Samajwadi Party, is due quite a bit of credit. I have been impressed by Akhilesh Yadav's leadership for a few years now. In 2017, he tied up with the Congress and crashed. In 2019, he tied up with Mayawati, and that flopped in the Lok Sabha election. In 2022, he went on his own with the slogan Ummeed Ka Cycle, and he improved his position, but still was unable to dislodge, the BJP, just reduced its majority in UP. But he has been, in a sense, fourth time lucky. But otherwise, I think the BJP's reverses were largely self-inflicted. Maharashtra is the second case, in point, where in the last few years, in the second Modi term, they had taken their politics of manipulation to an extreme, and there has been a backlash to that. Rajasthan, Haryana, I think the a section of farmers have turned away, from the BJP. And of course, they did not make the gains they were expecting in my home state, West Bengal. And in fact, they lost a few seats, came down from 18 last time to 12 this time. But, I would caution against seeing Modi as a spent force. Clearly, Modi has decided to brazen it out and continue as usual.
How do you see, that there is a talk about Modi underperforming because there was anger among the electorate with respect to unemployment, Agniveer scheme, the farmers' distress. Are these contributing factors, or is it just, the voter fatigue with the Modi invincibility, or what really has, or is it just some, as you mentioned, you talked about Uttar Pradesh and you talked about Maharashtra, is it just regional? Or if you see in many places across India, wherever they're winning, the voter share has come down as well.
Yes, I mean, overall, the BJP's nationwide vote share is, well, stagnant or
Mhm.
steady, whichever way you see it, at 37%. But this is a very important question. What caused this? Well, even if they don't acknowledge it, a certain debacle, for the BJP and for the Modi brand, which I, emphasize once again, is seriously damaged, by
Mhm.
this result. Um, Modi has a habit of not talking about anything, negative or problematic or troublesome. And that is at variance, as we all know, with the realities in our country.
Mhm.
So, of course, I again gave an interview to Al Jazeera English exactly a week or so ago on the night of the exit polls. And I mentioned, quite strongly that the number one issue in India, which is a pan-Indian issue, north, south, west, east, northeast, wherever you go, is unemployment. And within joblessness, berozgari. And within that, it's youth unemployment, and in particular, educated youth unemployment.
Right.
So we have millions and tens of millions of young Indians, women and men, who are graduates, but who can find no gainful employment. Whereas the farm sector is unable to support them and their families even minimally in many cases, let alone support their aspirations to a better life. So clearly, this grandiose rhetoric and propaganda of India, marching forward under the glorious visionary leadership of Modi to a
As a
wonderful
Vishwaguru.
future in the Amrit Kal, didn't resonate with a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
who know and experience daily in their lives, what the reality is. There has only been one previous example of a comparable personality cult to Modi's. And that, of course, is Indira Gandhi. Now, if you recall the Indira Gandhi personality cult, it started taking off from 1969 when she split the Congress and came into her own. But really, 1971 was her peak
Mm-hmm.
when first she was returned to power on the Garibi Hatao slogan.
Slogan.
And then by the end of the year, she won the Bangladesh War, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee called her Durga and so on.
Yeah.
But then the personality cult lasted for only a year or two longer, 1972, 73, and
Mm-hmm.
then it unraveled quite quickly. And, well, we all know by the middle of 1975, she is feeling threatened enough by gathering protest and a resurgent, political opposition across the country to clamp the emergency. Um, Last year, at some point, I was giving a lecture at Harvard University, and I said that Indira Gandhi's personality cult, which is the only comparable case before this, lasted only 2 or 3 years before
Mm-hmm.
unraveling. And this guy has, meaning Modi, has been, doing this personality cult business for the last 10
And
years.
yes.
And it shows no sign of waning. Well, in this election, we did have the first signs, the first definite signs of Modi fatigue. And
So,
David, because you mentioned it, that is a subset of the broader, unemployment issue. One thing I would like to mention before you move on to your next question is that if you look at Modi's track record as Gujarat chief minister from uh, uh, from 12 and a half years, from October 2001 till May 2014, he had a rather poor record of um, responding to the problems of the rural populace and especially the farming sector.
mm-hmm.
His so-called Gujarat model, which was so hyped up in 2014, was really about SEZs, both farmland and forest land given away to big corporates at throwaway prices and with all sorts of tax breaks and other lucrative incentives thrown in. So I think he may have repeated the same pattern as prime minister. He has a certain indifference towards the problems of rural India and of the beleaguered, farming population.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, can be electorally fatal because India is still a 70% rural country, and two-thirds of our people depend on farming in one way or the other.
So these factors have played a role. Apart from that, if you see Modi in these elections, uh, resorted to a lot of hate speeches. I mean, he had been doing maybe occasionally earlier, but this time there was a consistency in which he was making these speeches. And at least in 8 constituencies, including Banswara, where he talked about the infiltrators and Muslims who produced more children. And the party has lost. And in several others where he made these hate speeches, the voting margins are the victory margins are very slender. In Ayodhya, again, you see the BJP lost despite the Ram temple being central to its campaigning in rest of India. And so many analysts, sometimes tend to see this as a rejection of communal politics, particularly Islamophobia. And do you think that's a fair assessment, or are we just kind of jumping the gun?
In Uttar Pradesh, which of course was the most crucial to this hung parliament,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the BJP made two major errors, in my view. First of all, they took the state largely for granted. They thought, Ram Mandir would do the trick for them, and that proved to be not the case. Um, because growing frustration, anxiety over socioeconomic issues came to the fore, and people, at least some people, were no longer prepared to believe in the Modi personality cult, um, and what it promises to deliver. I would call Modi, Sonia Gandhi, uh, during the 2007 election campaign in Gujarat, in the state election in Gujarat, famously called Modi Maut Ka Saudagar,
Mm-hmm.
a merchant of death. And he turned that to his advantage by claiming that Sonia Gandhi had slighted Gujarat and Gujaratis, and that worked for him at the time. Now, I would, instead of calling him Maut Ka Saudagar, which he may well be, call him a Sapno Ka Saudagar. There was a Hindi movie
Yeah,
about 50 something years ago, which was a hit film, I think, Sapno Ka
right.
Saudagar. So he has been selling this dream merchant. He has been selling this dream of development, which is devoid of substance. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and people picked up on that this time, the third time. The second mistake that the BJP made, in my opinion, was to make the election this time, the Lok Sabha election, as late as possible. They kept it very late. They could have done it a little earlier, even, somewhat earlier. I don't know if they had called a slightly early election in tandem with the election commission and wrapped things up by, say, end of March, they may have won a comfortable majority. I don't know. Partly on the back of Ram Mandir. We'll never know the answer to that. But they kept the election very late, and then they prolonged it, this tortuous,
Yes,
exercise,
that also
over
worked against them.
more than 6 weeks, from April 19th, and with the campaign
Mm-hmm.
starting in early March, the final campaign, until early June, the first week of June. And that played to the BJP's disadvantage, because the opposition parties, which were behind in campaigning, used that time to get the act together. I think the thinking was that Modi, being the, the one and only star campaigner of the ruling dispensation, he'd have to go all around the country, hectoring, and so give him as much time as possible to do that, to get around as much of the country as possible. But in fact, it played to the opposition's advantage. Both Akhilesh Yadav, his decision to stand from Kannauj, and which he won very resoundingly, and
Mm-hmm.
Rahul Gandhi's decision to stand from Raebareli, which he also won very resoundingly, were very late decisions. And I think they took the plunge only after they had a sense that, that there is some hope for them. My final point, in response to this question, Anuradha, is that I think Modi did sense, because he's been in politics for a long time. He's been a grassroots worker, long before he became any kind of leader. Modi sensed that his what I would say is a fake narrative, a pseudo narrative of hope and aspiration, is not playing as strongly with the electorate as he had thought. And therefore, he made this pivot to hate speech, which of course is in his DNA, because he's a product of the movement, which is a movement, based on hate and polarization. So he made this hard pivot to hate speech, because he, I think, sensed that his grand narrative of hope and aspiration is not playing so strongly with the electorate. But you're completely right. It seems that the hate speech hasn't helped him. One of his late speeches was in the Dumka constituency of Jharkhand, which is a neighboring state from mine. And there, that's among the many constituencies where he engaged in full-blown hate speech of a very vulgar nature, and the BJP lost, and lost resoundingly.
So, I mean, you talked about where do we go from here? I mean, is it we talking about a coalition that has just been sworn in, and which you say it's pretty much like, BJP being in the majority, but it's still a coalition in terms of numbers, right? So would there be pulls and pressures of a typical coalition government? Even though, the cabinet, earlier there were speculations, Naidu would demand home ministry of the finance ministry, all the important portfolios, and that we haven't kind of seen that playing out. But there might still be, maybe they're waiting and watching the coalition partners, the allies. Would they go along with Modi in whatever he does, or would there be a difference in the way he functions, in the way that the parliament functions, or the institutions? Would there be some restoration of the institutions which have been impacted in the last 10 years due to democratic backsliding?
I don't think Modi is either capable or interested in changing his style of function.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably constitutionally incapable of doing it, even if he were to want to. And all the indications are that so far is that he's going to try and run this government as if the BJP had got 340 instead of 240. But the reality is different. And certainly, there can be tensions, there can even be crises, given that the so-called NDA coalition itself has a relatively small majority of only, about 20 or so, beyond the 272 mark. I anticipate that Modi and Shah will try to uh, improve their numbers by poaching from here and there, and maybe get up to about 300. But that's still, far short of the rhetoric of 370 and 400 and all of that. That's still a fairly, small and vulnerable coalition majority. So the other factor is that the BJP, over the last 10 years, the BJP has come to be completely dominated by the cabal of two, the Modi Shah duo. Now, since whether they acknowledge it or not, this result represents a very serious setback from their own expectations and what was there in 2014 and even more so in 2019. One can't entirely, rule out, trouble within the BJP, however cowed they have been over the last 10 years.
Sorry, I'll interrupt you. There are also fissures within the BJP.
Yes.
There could also be a tussle of for power there.
Yeah, to go back to the imperfect Indira Gandhi analogy, Indira Gandhi's supremacy in the Congress and later the Congress I was because she was the one and only vote getter. Okay, so people had to kowtow to her. Now Modi was in a similar position, but as I've said already and I repeat it now, the Modi brand, the Modi personality cult is seriously damaged by this result. So one can expect, questioning to begin that Modi is not the kind of vote getter, not inevitable, winner that he has been portrayed to be. So where do we go now? Um, the other factor, of course, is that after all, the opposition numbers have significantly improved.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the so-called India alliance is really a hodgepodge, and they didn't even publish a one-page bullet point of common principles. They held a very small number, just a bare handful of joint rallies. And of course, they didn't have a declared prime ministerial candidate. But all that said, so it remained, it's quite remarkable that the BJP lost its parliamentary majority in this way, despite the India alliance being largely a phantom alliance.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, the opposition has significantly improved its numbers in parliament. I wrote an article which came out in several digital outlets last month in May, that India's parliamentary democracy is facing a crisis, because it's quite clear from the record of the last 10 years that Mr. Modi and his enforcer, Mr. Shah, have only an instrumental relationship with parliamentary democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and is particularly during the second Modi term, 2019 to 2024, although it was coming in the first term, Parliament has been, marginalized and emasculated in a way unprecedented in the political history of independent India. Its sittings have been reduced to a bare minimum. Just last December, nearly 150 opposition parliamentarians were expelled, from Parliament. That is unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
And basically, during the second Modi term, although it was coming during the first term, Parliament became a forum for basically table thumping and rubber stamping
Mm-hmm.
the Shah duos, that is the executives, the out of control authoritarian executives' decisions and initiatives. Well, we all know what happened in the first 6 months after Modi was re-elected in May 2019. Within 6 months, we had the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act,
Mm-hmm.
and 3 months after that, or 4 months after that, we had the Citizenship Amendment Act,
Yes.
which, of course, the BJP had been pushing in Parliament since 2016, but they got it passed in December 2019. So basically,
It will be
given
difficult to do this at this point in time with the opposition,
I'm
which is
coming to that,
stronger and
given the changed circumstances, and the improved numbers and morale of the opposition after this, latest
mm-hmm.
election, uh, it would be quite difficult for the third, Modi Shah government to keep, ramming through contentious legislations and railroading, laws, through Parliament. Um, but as I've already said, and I put myself in a spot there perhaps, but I'm quite sure I'm right, Modi is unwilling to and probably incapable of changing his authoritarian style of function. He has a long record of that as Gujarat chief minister, and then for the last 10 years, more and more so as India's prime minister. So we have a conundrum here because, Modi and Shah can't do what they have been doing for the last 10 years, and especially in the last 5 years, but their outlook, and their attitudes and their approach to politics and governance remains the same. So
Mm-hmm.
I foresee, turbulent, times ahead in the next, months, perhaps. We may not even have to wait, a year or two. But what I'm glad has happened because of this hung parliament is that what I feared, I wrote this in this article that I published, last month called "The Crisis of India's Parliamentary Democracy," is that I really feared that this cavernous, garish new parliament which they have made, replacing the stately, elegant
Yes.
old parliament. There was no need to do this anyway. The new India, of course, or new Bharat, I should say. The That this cavernous, garish new parliament was simply going to become an echo chamber and a sad
Mm-hmm.
monument to parliamentary democracy stripped of its substance and reduced to its trappings. This was clearly the Modi-Shah duo's intention, but it'll be much more difficult to do that right now.
Hello, I'm Anuradha Bhasin, the managing editor of the Kashmir Times, which is now available in a digital format. We bring you in-depth coverage and news analysis to combat the erasure of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh. For this, we need your support. Join us in our fight. Become a member today by paying an amount of your choice. Also subscribe to our YouTube news channel and our newsletter for free. Thank you.
So I think the rejection of what the BJP government and the Modi-Shah duo did on 5th, 6th August 2019 and ever since then is actually cuts across regional borders. It cuts across, social groups and formations. And it's one thing that the people of the former state of Jammu and Kashmir can largely agree on, despite their many internal differences, is that nobody likes what has been done on and since August 2019. That is a rare point of unity, because if I'm right that the Modi-Shah duo and their assortment of cronies are going to try and run this government, very much like the previous two governments, then there is really no hope for Jammu and Kashmir, because after all, what's been happening for the last 10 years in India as a whole is not just an unprecedented assault on institutions, whether it's parliament or anything else, that has been accompanied by an all-out assault on the edifice of civil liberties and basic democratic freedoms. So even if there is a limited and partial restoration of that in Jammu and Kashmir, that would be a big step in the right direction. So let's hope for the best.
Yes, that's interesting. I mean, there's just so many questions right now with the kind of formations that we have, but I'll have to quickly move to Jammu and Kashmir. And Sumantra, you're somebody who's worked intensively on Kashmir conflict. So how do you see the election result in Jammu and Kashmir? Is the vote by and large a rejection of BJP's policies in Kashmir? With respect to particularly abrogation, it's very muscular policy thereafter. And or is there more to it?
Well, let's take it region by region.
Yes.
I'll start with Ladakh.
Ladakh, yes.
So I spent a week, driving in Ladakh in August 2022, and I had interactions with a range of people, with a cross section of society in both the Kargil and the Leh districts. It was very instructive, and this was close to 2 years ago in August 2022, but the conclusions were quite clear. Well, what's happened in Ladakh, of course, is that this independent candidate from Kargil has won, and that was a foregone conclusion. And there are two candidates from the Buddhist community who've come second and third, and the Kargili candidate has won with 49% of the votes, and it's quite telling that of the two candidates from the Buddhist community, the BJP candidate has come third. With 23% of the vote. It's the Congress candidate who has come second. Now, I know that in Ladakh, post 2019, there has been, gathering discontent among the Buddhist community, who feel that, they agitated for union territory status for 30 years, before it happened. But they belatedly realized, at least most of them realized, that they'd been led up the garden path. That instead of their empowerment, they had been politically disempowered, and They feel, culturally threatened. They feel their habitat is in peril, and they have serious concerns about land rights, jobs, and their cultural integrity as a remote peripheral region. So in Ladakh, we can certainly view the result. The Kargili candidate winning, and the Buddhist candidate from the Congress party coming second as a rejection of the post-2019 dispensation. But this is not a surprise, because the Kargil, the majority population in Kargil, who are mainly Shias, they never wanted union territory status in the
In
first
the
place.
first place, right?
So they've been seething, and in Eastern Ladakh, the Buddhists have become, more and more, disgruntled and disillusioned, because this is the opposite of the, the empowerment that they had sought. Now, in
It's also interesting that they kind of have also fought on the traditional sub-regional fault lines at the same time. Kargil versus Ladakh, Buddhist versus Muslim. Though there is an anti-BJP sentiment, and you can see that the BJP candidate has finished third, not second. But there's also an overwhelming, and it's surprising, because 2 months ago they were unitedly fighting for sixth schedule in the constitution, and suddenly you see these
That's
fault
what I
lines.
fear. That's what electoral politics does sometimes. That I fear that this, this a certain, if not unity, coordination between Kargil and Leh that had emerged after August 2019, that will be damaged, and that the old, Kargil-Leh fracture will reappear. And of course, as you say, after being at loggerheads for a long time, the two districts and their respective majority groups had basically united over a common set of demands. That is a elected duty legislature, sixth schedule notification, and finally, full statehood for Ladakh. And I fear that will be undermined, by this result, and the old fracture will reappear.
Mhm.
And
Let's move on to where the
Jammu. Well,
BJP
your
has.
home
Oh,
region, yeah.
yes.
Well,
The-
there also the outcome is on expected lines.
There was a deepening resentment even within Jammu region against, the BJP's policies, but at the same time, you find that they still seem to be under control of, the Modi brand worked, and that was in the initial phases of polling the Jammu seats. The victory margin may have narrowed down. But the interesting thing was that the BJP, which was using the rhetoric of 370, हमने 370 हटा दिया in rest of the country, they seem to have used more of the Ram temple while campaigning in Jammu.
Right. So in the two Jammu constituencies, Jammu and Udhampur, BJP candidates have won, as you point out, with reduced margins from last time, but still in both constituencies, the margins are well above 1 lakh. So these are fairly, decisive, victories. Both of these contests were pretty bipolar, straight fights between the BJP and the Congress candidates. There really weren't any significant, third or fourth parties or candidates. The discontent among, Jammu Hindus with the post August 2019 situation has, as you know better than me, been there for the last 5 years. And it cuts across, the Jammu Hindu population. There are the businessmen, the traders, and other sectors of the population. who are all, not quite happy, with losing statehood, being, relegated to a duty, ruled by bureaucrats, and a complete absence of any representative institutions, and the domicile certificates being extended to all sorts of
Right.
new categories of people, and the prospect of, local businesses, entrepreneurships, suffering, as a result. And of course, the Jammu Hindus were like everybody else in the, what was the state of Jammu and Kashmir. They were used to a certain situation, which there
Mhm.
were
Their
certain,
privileges, their
protections. One can call them privileges, one can call them protections. But, these have been there, not only, after 1947, but, much of these actually dates to the princely state. So, people were habituated to this. And suddenly there's this radical change and this disruption. But at the end of the day, as I expected, the Jammu Hindus mostly went with the BJP. And why did they go with the BJP? I think, well, the Modi personality cult, still works, although it's weakening, clearly. And they thought as Hindus they should not come out openly,
Mhm.
against the Modi slash BJP government. That would be going too far, at least at this stage. And of course, Jammu Hindus, as you know, have a long history of voting for the dominant party at the center.
Yeah.
They mostly used to vote for the Congress, during the decades that the Congress was the dominant party at the
Mhm.
center. So now that the BJP is the dominant, the ruling
Yeah.
party at the center,
Till about
and
15 years ago, that's how they were voting. Yeah.
yeah, by far the largest, political party of India, they've gone with that. So one can, the Jammu result didn't surprise me. It's pretty much
Mhm.
as expected. Well, lastly, we come
The
to
valley.
the Kashmir Valley plus Poonch Rajouri, because of the
Uh-huh.
recon,
The
constancy
new realignment. Yeah.
boundaries. And well, uh, there are 2 points that can be made right away, that the various dynastic heirs, uh, well, if you leave out Rohilla, who's from the Aga family, but I'm not
Mhm.
counting him in that capacity here. The more prominent dynastic heirs, namely Omar Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti, as well as Sajjad Lone, all not only lost, but they lost badly.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that is a fallout of August 2019 as well. That these establishment politicians, credibility and standing was fatally undermined, and they clearly haven't, recovered from that. Mehbooba lost by a huge margin to
Yeah.
the NC candidate who's uh, from the Gujjar community, Mia Altaf, Mia
Mhm.
Bashir's son. And the Omar Abdullah lost by more than 2 lakh votes to Engineer Rashid, who's in Tihar jail. And Sajjad Lone, came third. And it was funny that in the Baramulla constituency, so the North Kashmir constituency, um, Engineer Rashid polled more votes than Omar Abdullah, Sajjad Lone, and the
Yes.
PDP candidate put together. He had more votes, than them.
Mhm.
So it seems that the people, that's lesson number one, that the people of the Kashmir Valley are, well, you can never rule this dynastic heirs out, but they may stage a comeback for all you know, if the national circumstances change.
Mhm.
But somehow I doubted that they will recover their earlier clout. That
Kashmir.
it
Mhm.
seems that the people of Kashmir, of the valley in particular, are really, tired of these people, these establishment development politicians from the dynasties,
Mm-hmm.
and they are looking for fresh blood. So that's the first point that can be made. The second point to be made is that, of course, and this was covered internationally as well. Al Jazeera ran articles on it and so on their website, on their English website, that the BJP did not put up any candidates
Mm-hmm.
in the three, Kashmir Valley plus Rajouri Poonch seats. But they did have this proxy party of sorts, the Apni Party,
Apni
uh,
party and
which
Azad's party.
ran, the King's Party, which ran candidates in Srinagar and also in Anantnag, Rajouri, and
Mm-hmm.
fared very poorly,
Yes.
polled, really poorly. So it was quite clear that there are no takers in the Kashmir Valley, which is not exactly a surprise for the radical solution that has been inflicted since 5th August 2019. But but I'd like to say that you remember those bogus DDC polls at the end of 2020. They were
Yes.
really bogus and weird
Right.
elections for this completely, new, institutions called the district development
And then they
councils.
started poaching. BJP lost in the valley and they
Yeah,
started poaching them.
but so there were about 29 lakh votes that were cast in those weird and bogus elections,
Mm-hmm.
and almost 20 lakh were from the Jammu region, and more from the Hindu majority southern districts than elsewhere in the Jammu region. But there were about 9 lakh that were also cast in the Kashmir Valley. This is at the end of 2020. And, um, there was something quite interesting, about that result, which I pointed out in my book, Kashmir at the Crossroads, inside a 21st century conflict, that came out at the end of 2021. And that was in the Kashmir Valley, the single largest share of the vote was actually not polled by this so-called, People's Alliance for Gupkar Declaration, which
Mm-hmm.
has dissipated, since then completely. But the single largest share of the vote was polled by independents. You know, the vote share of the 9 lakh or so votes polled in the Kashmir Valley was 42% independents, 35% for that Gupkar alliance, which is
Yes.
disintegrated, 7% for Congress, and 3% for BJP.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed like people were even then in these bogus and weird elections, favoring independence, rather than
New formations rather than that
new
do not
formations. Yeah,
have any linkages with New
yeah.
Delhi and
That is
rejection.
that is a fallout of the radical solution inflicted since 5th August 2019. It sort of has rubbed the slate clean.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it has just erased, or more or less erased, what was there. And there was something else about the Jammu region. Uh, there are 4 southern Jammu districts, Jammu, Kathua,
Right.
Udhampur, and Samba, which are heavily Hindu, which are 85 to 90% Hindu. Now, and in the DDC elections at the end of 2020, there was quite brisk polling in those districts in particular, as one would expect. Um, what was the result? Overall, in the Jammu region, taken as a whole, um, the BJP polled only 34% of the votes cast
Mm-hmm.
in the elections, just one third, not more. And then I looked more closely at the 4 heavily Hindu districts in the south. And I saw that although these districts are all 85 to 90% Hindu in terms of demography, the BJP had not polled even 50% in any of those districts. They had polled around 40-45%, which means that, not even half the Hindus of Jammu who came out to vote in these DDC elections had voted for BJP. They had voted for other parties and formations. So I think the rejection of what the BJP government and the Modi Shah duo did uh, on 5th, 6th August 2019, and ever since then, is actually cuts across regional borders. It cuts across, social groups and formations. And it's one thing that the people of the former state of Jammu and Kashmir can largely agree on, despite their many internal differences, is that nobody likes uh, what has been done um, on and since August 2019. That is a rare point of unity because Jammu and Kashmir, and in that I include Ladakh for the time being, it's been severed from Jammu and Kashmir. That Jammu and Kashmir is so diverse. The BJP has taken the politics of manipulation to an extreme since August 2019. Pitting Jammu against Kashmir, Muslim against Hindu, Gujjar against Kashmiri, Pahari against Gujjar, what have you.
Right.
And
So
because Jammu is so diverse, the manipulative politics, can be played. But so it's quite remarkable that the rejection of the 5th, 6th August 2019 solution is so complete across the former state.
Exactly. So is the voter actually giving a message to New Delhi? And it certainly is, but is New Delhi going to listen in its present form? Or is any other, I mean, whatever formation, even if we say the opposition would, Modi suffers a debacle, or, if the coalition doesn't pull along and there are fresh elections or a new government takes place, is anybody sitting in New Delhi and the way they have functioned in the last 70 years, is anybody going to ever listen to or heed the message that the voter from Jammu and Kashmir has given this time?
I'm not optimistic, uh, frankly, given what has gone on for the last, 70 plus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but let me, qualify that a bit. If I'm right that the Modi Shah duo and their, assortment of, cronies are going to try and run this government, you know, very much like the previous two governments,
Mm-hmm.
then, there is really no hope for Jammu and Kashmir. Because, this has been their flagship initiative of the second Modi government. Modi was boasting about Article 370, wherever he went in the country. And he said he wants 370 seats because he cancelled Article 370, which is kind of very absurd thing to say, but he was actually saying this. Um, you know, um, However, since we also discussed this earlier, that there is a very strong likelihood that it won't be easy to make it business as usual. Given that this is a hung parliament, BJP doesn't have a parliamentary majority, there could be a churn within the BJP. And of course, we have notorious comedians like Nitish Kumar and others, and who are completely unpredictable. I don't want to single
Remember
him
the
out.
Ayaram, Gayaram, he's kind
Yeah,
of
he's the
beaten Ayaram, Gayaram.
he's the Palti king of India right now. So he's done it half a dozen times in the last 10 years, 10 or 11 years. So there, okay, let's just talk about scenarios that that this government proves to be not stable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Perhaps there's a midterm election. Um, Let us just assume, for the sake of analysis, that a non-BJP opposition government comes to
Mm-hmm.
power. okay, sometime in the next year or 2 years after a midterm election. This is purely a scenario, of course, at this stage, but it can't be ruled out because there's something really unstable that
Mm-hmm.
about rulers who won't change, their style, their politics, their approach, but they don't have a parliamentary majority. Okay, they're behaving, as if nothing has changed when, in fact,
Mm-hmm.
a lot has changed. Well, um, what if this opposition government says we are going to restore statehood as a first step to Jammu and Kashmir? Well, what will the BJP do? They will bounce on this and they will go all over the country,
Mm-hmm.
saying that the opposition is once again practicing the politics of appeasement. It's selling out to separatists and terrorists and Pakistan and God knows what. So I very much doubt that any opposition government will have the guts to, pick up this hot potato and do anything about it, because the BJP will remain in play as a major opposition party, and such a situation where an opposition government is trying to roll back at least some of the terrible things that have been done since August 2019 in Jammu and Kashmir will be a tailor-made situation for them to capitalize on, to whip up a frenzy, in various parts of the country. So I'm not that optimistic. But if this present government proves to be does not does not last and is replaced by a non-BJP government in one way or the other, then there are certain improvements that are realistic. So, for example, well, I'm speaking to you. Your father was the dua of journalism in Jammu and Kashmir, and particularly of English language journalism. Everyone in Jammu and Kashmir knows, uh, you know, uh, the the contribution and the stature of Ved Bhasin, uh, and uh, and you are his successor. Um, well, uh, as you know better than me, you don't need me to tell you, the press has been completely destroyed in Jammu and over the last 5 years, right? And it was a
Right.
vibrant press, and
Mm-hmm.
particularly in English, which is the
Our
international.
print papers shut down, I mean, which
Yes,
was
yeah,
on since 1954.
yeah,
So, yeah.
international and global language. I mean, inshallah, it will start again. But I think the digital path is also, the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
The 21st century, given all the new technology we have at our disposal, we have a younger generation that
Right.
doesn't, pick up the daily, broadsheet
Mm-hmm.
like we old fogies, like to do because that's our habit. So maybe some of the lost freedom of the press. The press has been completely destroyed in Jammu and Kashmir, a very vibrant
Mm-hmm.
press. Some
That
of
could.
that can come back. It can begin to be restored.
Mm-hmm.
That an important, development. And then, of course, there's another issue which I can think of: the large numbers of political prisoners who are still in jail and without charge, without trial. One of them is sitting in Tihar jail and has been elected to the 18th Lok Sabha, and so the release of these political prisoners, who are spending years and years, behind bars without trial, without charge,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing can happen.
So there could be some relief, but it would be by and large business as usual with some cosmetic measures giving a semblance of civil liberties, and that's the likelihood.
For starters,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I
It
think
would.
the repair of institutions will be more difficult and will take
Mhm.
more time. But, one should not underestimate the importance of the restoration of basic, a certain restoration at least.
Mhm.
They've never been observed in Jammu and Kashmir, and particularly in the Kashmir Valley since the 1950s. So, what Modi and Shah did in the last 5 years is just a
You're a
a
very
very
good
harsh
side.
version of what had been going on for 70 years already. A very harsh and punitive form of the same policy. Um, so one should not underestimate the contribution of a certain restoration of basic democratic rights and civil liberties, like uh, a certain resurgence of the press, which has been completely
Mhm.
destroyed, or the release of political prisoners. Because after all, what's been happening for the last 10 years in India as a whole is not just an unprecedented assault on institutions, whether it's parliament or anything else, that has been accompanied by an all-out assault on the edifice of civil liberties and basic democratic freedoms. So even if there is a limited and partial restoration of that in Jammu and Kashmir, that would be a big step in the right direction. So let's hope for the best, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, let's hope. And I good to end on a hopeful note. Thank
Yeah,
you for
I'm a,
sharing.
I'm an optimist by nature, but one should also be realistic.
Pragmatic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but let's hope for the best. This election result shows that all is not lost
Of
just yet.
course. So thank you for your insightful views, and your perspectives have enriched our discussion so much with your valuable clarity and depth. I really appreciate.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to talk to you, Anuradha. And